When you think of James Cameron, you wouldn't be wrong if the first thing that comes to mind is an enormous, expensive, technologically revolutionary badass action set piece, like this one. But I think you'd be even less wrong if you thought about this. The T-800's hand twisting into a thumbs up on its way into the molten steel at the end of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It's the end of the climactic third act that was, of course, chock full of shape-shifting AI and explosions and trucks full of liquid nitrogen. That this moment is the most indelible image in a movie led by a deadly robot from the future is kind of insane. 30 years on, I believe this simple close-up of that time-traveling cybernetic organism's hand is more affecting than anything else the film has to offer because Cameron understands one thing that a lot of directors don't. Action movies don't work without moments like this.
I know now why you cry.
And when you step back and look at all the things that had to go right for this one image to be seared into our collective pop culture brains, it's a miracle that it worked. Any good movie needs a payoff. The plan that comes together, or the villain whose uppance has come, or a theme, just an idea that gets set up and seen through to its end. In the case of the T2 thumbs up, its most basic function is a callback, a visual reference to a scene earlier in the film. But this climactic sequence in the steel mill features two prominent callbacks, and it's the very specific placement of them that makes the thumbs up even more brilliant.
And if someone gets upset, you say, chill out. Or you could do combination.
The first of the callbacks,
Hasta la vista, baby,
is much more easily recognized, as the line was played for laughs earlier in the film and then called back as a no bullshit perfect action movie one-liner at a critical point in the final act.
hasta la vista, baby.
The thumbs up is the second callback to the same narrative thread that brings the movie to a close. It's a 1-2 punch that's in keeping with the foundation laid by James Cameron at every stage of the film. To back up for just a second, it's important to remember that this movie isn't just about saving the world from the future, or battling sci-fi tropes to bloody and explosive ends. It's got gobs of that stuff, to be sure. That's the narrative level of the film. But the emotional level of the movie, underneath everything else, is about a boy and his robot. But let's start with the narrative function first.
No, don't do it, don't go!
It has to end here.
The film establishes the narrative goal near the midpoint, after John and the T-800 rescue Sarah and head out on the run.
Will these heal up?
Yes.
Good. Can't pass for human, you're not much good to us.
And so, John gets a task, to train this AI to be more human. Their success depends on it. It begins as an imitation of humanity, attempting legitimately unsettling facial expressions, and just parroting the lines that are fed to him.
Chill out. Dickwad.
That's great, see, you're getting it.
And through this narrative function, the relationship between John and the T-800 begins to form. But there's an inevitability to it that begins to shift gears into a thematic level, something like destiny in the dynamic between them that Sarah, a hardened warrior at this point, doesn't see the point in fighting. And it's in this moment where she realizes her son has found a dedicated surrogate father, an artificial companion with which he can form a very real attachment, that we see the thumbs up.
Of all the would-be fathers who came and went over the years, this thing, this machine, was the only one who measured up.
In the setting sun, in slow motion, this is the surreal moment where something squishier is happening. There are no narrative rules being set up here or tangible stakes being established. This shot, coupled with Sarah's musing VO, is all feeling. And so, the narrative function of John's relationship with the Terminator has been coupled with the emotional function of it as well, which is how James Cameron sets up the 1-2 punch of climactic callbacks for the end of the film. First, to bring the narrative arc to a close, we get the infinitely quotable one-liner before the kill shot.
Hasta la vista, baby.
But as the T-1000 thaws and reforms in a bit of practical effects wizardry that belongs in a different video, Cameron is telling us that the film is not over. His worlds are not a simple one-liner away from a resolution. The defeat of a mimetic polyalloy killing machine is not what this movie was ever about. Yes, it was hard work,
I need a vacation.
but there's a wholly separate emotional core of the film that has yet to resolve.
No.
Unsuspectingly, we've been set up for one final gut punch and the real resolution to the movie.
I order you not to go. I order you not to go.
What makes it more effective is that we're not going to see it coming because of the dreamy, offhanded way it was set up half a movie ago. And by the time we get to the thumbs up, we've had a fake-out win, the real narrative win, and now we're settled in and ready to have our cold hearts melted along with the Terminator. But I would argue, and I will right now, that the perfect thumbs up actually started about 10 years prior to T2's release, back when Arnold, shall we say, wasn't at the most rangy stage of his career.
I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do.
10 years prior to the first tears shed over the thumbs up, Arnold was something of an oddity. He'd worked in movies a bit, and of course he was more famous than any other bodybuilder could ever hope to be, but he really found his early formula for success with Conan the Barbarian. It was a breakthrough of an epic high fantasy film, and that genre covers all manner of sins. The conceit that the world is magical and distant and mythical moves any need for realism or even logic to the background. Conan was a stoic and near unstoppable machine of death and destruction created by a harsh world. Conan's allure is based on the imagery, not empathy, from Arnold's Mr. Universe physique all the way to the final image of Conan aged and on his throne. The success of the film spawned a sequel that would come out in the same year as Cameron's first Terminator film, which truly launched Schwarzenegger's career. Here's a villain performance that's a cold, blank screen on which the audience can project their fears for the future. AI was a potential terror that most audiences in the early 80s didn't truly understand, and here was an actor giving a silent and intimidating performance of the unfeeling menace that could be in store for humanity. If Conan revealed Arnold's strengths as a performer, they weren't used to their fullest potential until the Terminator.
You asshole.
From there, Arnold's career highlights would see him gradually lean into leading man charisma. The mostly a documentary Pumping Iron had introduced moviegoers to Mr. Olympia himself.
One and only Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The real Arnold in this partly dramatized film was downright charming and kind of a prick in a really funny way.
And then she's gonna fix me up with your sister.
Like any of the thousands of muscles on display in his bodybuilding contests, it took time and effort to temper his on-screen performances with the same type of magnetism.
Stick around.
But in the 7 years between delivering one of the most iconic movie lines in history,
I'll be back.
and making good on that promise, the roles that were all stoic purveyors of violence gave way to killers with principles, and eventually kindergarten cops. The point is, the 80s got Arnold ready to sell a face turn with the T-800, and this whole section of the video is just to make the point that the thumbs up doesn't work if the arc within the movie of the T-800 learning to be human doesn't also work.
There's no fit but what we make for ourselves.
The hints that Cameron and Schwarzenegger dropped throughout the film, the subtle reactions to John pulling a high five, the Cheshire grin as he poses with the minigun, even the moments immediately before being lowered into the molten steel, are all moments that Schwarzenegger earlier in his career most likely couldn't sell. But in Judgment Day, they're also all in service of landing one last bit of evidence that John and the Terminator's relationship was meaningful. There's a boy and his pet imagery throughout most of the film, with John teaching his shiny new T-800 tricks. By the end then, it gives the thumbs up an added layer. It's saying that the T-800 has learned his tricks perfectly, with one last nuanced performance on its way to completing his mission. But the thumbs up is also directed at John, who's lived begrudgingly with his mom's insistence that he become a great leader. And this final message from his T-800 is also encouragement after a job well done. When the movie opens, John is a delinquent with a record, stealing his foster parents' ATM card and hacking their PIN to steal cash and joyride at the Sherman Oaks Galleria. He's even bitter about his mom. He's a kid with no allegiance to anybody. Then a robot assassin from the future becomes a surrogate father and makes him cry. It's incredible that Cameron would rely on the heart in a movie about murderous robots from the future trying to kill us should not have been surprising. Even at that point in his career, he's always had a track record of expertly tying the emotional stakes of a story to the action. With Aliens, he transitioned a haunted house sci-fi thriller about space truckers who wanted hazard pay into a full-blown action spectacle, but grounded the film with a surrogate-parent relationship between Ripley and Newt, a woman out of her own time and a little girl who was just as stranded.
Hard to believe there's a little girl under all this.
The Abyss was a film that blazed new trails with visual effects, but the most incredible moment in the whole film is the silence during a scene where Ed Harris tries desperately to resuscitate the woman he loves in Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, only to have her do the same for him a few scenes later. The truth is, practically anybody can drain the LA River and have a semi-truck plow into it. But it's moments like the thumbs up that show his mastery of filmmaking infinitely more than any camera he could ever invent. James Cameron doesn't just blow shit up, he breaks your heart too. Thanks for watching, and if you want more about Terminator 2, there's a great piece buried in our epic 52-minute long video, Top 10 Practical Effects of All Time. And for more about why we love movies like a lot, be sure to subscribe to Cinefix.